Welcome. This video is going to be an overview of the features of this Marantz PMD740. It's not going to be a review per se because I haven't actually used this unit yet. I'm waiting for some spare parts to come in so I can fix it. This is a spares unit that belongs to a guy called Andy Pickering. If you want to hear what this sounds like, Andy's a songwriter and multi-instrumentalist who's recorded a large number of albums using his other Marantz PMD740. He's made a very good video demonstrating his process recording with this. I'll put a link to that video in the description, so you should check that out if you want to know what sort of results you can get with this, which are pretty impressive. This is a unit that came out in 1993 so far as I can tell. I'm saying that on the basis of a review came out in the summer of that year. The recommended retail price of this unit in the United Kingdom was £849. We've looked at the relative prices of Tascam and Fostex units around that time and it works out as over £1,000 in 2020 money. This would be significantly more than that, so you know, it'd be like, tell you what, I'll put it up on the screen exactly what the price is, but it was the expensive one. It was pretty much the most expensive 4-track that was going at that time. It's actually not too heavy. The footprint's fairly large, which you would expect with a unit that's got a lot of bells and whistles like what this does. But when you think that it's quite close in its specification to say Tascam 246, 424 Mark III, it's not any larger than a 424 Mark III. It's a little bit smaller than a 246. A 246 would come off to this edge of the screen here, in addition to being about the same sort of depth and everything. As you can see from this switch here, it is a dual speed machine, so it's going to be capable of playing at 3 3/4 inches per second, which is double the speed of commercial cassette. That feature is included for better quality, the trade-off being that you run through the cassettes twice as fast. It's also capable of playing at the lower speed of 1 7/8 inches per second. That's the same speed as a commercial cassette, which would mean that you'd also be able to play back demos made on low speed Portastudios, depending on the compatibility of the noise reduction. I mean, if there's no noise reduction on your old recordings, you could turn off DBX and it sound exactly the same. You're going to try and play back something that was recorded with Dolby noise reduction. Might sound a little bit weird, but it would work. Since we're talking about the noise reduction anyway, you can see that the DBX is turned on and off with the switch here. There's also a switch here to turn on and off sync. When that's turned on, track 4 is coming out of an output on the back, and the output is controlled by this knob here. You can use track 4 then to stripe with data to be used for SMPTE or MIDI synchronization, so you can run a sequencer of some kind alongside this. Bearing in mind that this technology is before the advent of digital audio workstations and so on, so having some sort of facility to have tape recording alongside MIDI sequencing and that kind of thing was a kind of a big deal in the early 90s. Other thing to note about this unit's noise reduction is that it's got HX Pro in addition to DBX. And I had to look this up, but apparently HX Pro is an encode only thing. Encode only meaning that in comparison to DBX, where you need to have a unit that's got the same decoder as it was encoded with, I hope that makes sense, but HX Pro is encode only. So what it's doing basically is it's adjusting the bias depending on the high frequency content of what's being recorded. That's giving you a bit more headroom for the high end, so you get better high end. You know, one of the things that some people don't like about DBX, though I actually like the sound of it, is that it does kind of shave off a lot of the high end from your sound, which is another way of saying that it boosts the low end and the mids, which is why I like it. But if you want a crisper sound, then this will write that into the tape, providing you set the levels correctly, and so you don't need to play the recordings you made on this machine back on this machine. You could make a recording on this and play it back on a Tascam and you still get the benefit of that HX Pro feature. As with every 4-track that I've looked at here, it's a 2-head system. We've got a raise head to the left and a combination record and playback head to the right. Which of the two modes it's in depends on how you set the other functions. The unit uses these kind of piano touch buttons as opposed to mechanical control of the cassette transport. Let's at this point get this plugged in. Here's the original power supply. It's chonky. It's rated for 1.1 amps, 12 volts DC, positive center. I did try and use a generic power adapter, but I found that the barrel was a little bit narrower. This is just like a little bit chunkier as well, this end of it. Right, there we go. Now we can see meter display. That's nice and visible. And you can also see these VU meters lit up green, and when you go into record mode, they light up red, which is a very nice feature. Much easier for you to tell whether you're recording or not. And this digital control of the tape counter has a full complement of features. It's got 2 memory points. Even when you reset the meter, those memory points refer to a specific point on the tape as opposed to a point relative to the counter. You can set this up so that it's continuously going from the start point to the end point, rewinding back and playing, so you can rehearse your takes, and you can also use those memory points as auto punch in, punch out points. So that makes all of this equivalent to the features that you get on the Tascam 464-44 Mark III. I've actually demonstrated those features. I imagine this unit works in a fairly similar way, so watch out for that video. Let's look at these inputs. These inputs represent a nice blend between the best features of my 2 favourite Tascam Portastudios, the 424 Mark III and the 246. The thing that's nice about the 424 Mark III is that it has XLR inputs, but it doesn't have inserts, whereas the 246, it's got 1/4 inch inputs only, but it has insert points. If you don't know what insert points are, you can take a Y cable out of here and then you can run your microphone through a compressor, so you're recording through compressor to tape. The other thing that's good about them is you can actually use this with a mono cable and bypass the input preamplifier that's built into the multi-tracker. So that's a way you can take advantage of, say you've got a really high gain, high quality, phantom power enabled external mixer or preamp, then you can use these insert points to take advantage of those preamps instead of using the built-in ones. So this Marantz has both of those features. We've got a line-in socket that goes in directly to the left-right master bus. So if you want to record that, then the record arm switches need to be set up for left and right recording mode as opposed to direct mode. I'll talk more about that later on. And then there are similar concerns with these 2 unbalanced inputs, 5 and 6. 5, it goes to tracks 1 and 3 apparently, whereas input 6 goes to tracks 2 and 4. Moving over to this side, here's your line out, that's your master out. You've got individual tape outs that don't pass through the mixer, so that's a way to capture your cassette session into the digital domain if you had enough inputs on your sound card. Were you to record tracks 1 and 2 out of the line out and then tracks 3 and 4 out of the line out, what you might find is because of little inconsistencies in the motor speed that those 2 files aren't exactly the same length, whereas if you record all 4 of these tape outputs simultaneously, then all 4 digital files will definitely be the same length. Here's the input and output for channel 4 when it's in synchronization mode. So you'd strike track 4 with your SMPTE data or MIDI data or whatever using that socket, and then on playback it would come out of this socket, go to the sequencer or what have you, and keep that in synchronization with the audio that you're recording on tracks 1, 2 and 3. Here's your effect send. It's mono, but the return is stereo. So that enables you to use pseudo stereo effects like ping pong, delays, auto pan effects. You would put a mono signal in and you'd get a stereo effect back. It's a little bit more limited than the Tascam 44 Mark III or the 246, both of which have 2 effect sends, meaning that you can have a stereo send or 2 mono sends, which you can place in the stereo field individually. So I would say that as far as send bus effects go, this is a little bit more limited than the closely equivalent Tascams are. And then you've got your mono tape cue out that relates to the mono mix that you can make in this section of the mixer here, which is something you would use just so that what you're hearing as you record isn't the same as what's going to the tape machine. I'll talk more about that again in a minute. Moving on to talking about the routing of the signal from the mixer to the cassette player. Whether you're using the balanced or unbalanced, that's the XLR or the 1/4 inch jack input for tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, depends on these push-push switches. And then how those are recorded to tape depends on how these 4 switches are set. So safe obviously means nothing is recording. And then you have the option of recording either direct mode, meaning that channel 1 of the tape goes to track 1 of the cassette player. Set this one to direct, then channel 2 of the mixer is going to track 2 of the cassette player, and so on. If instead of using the direct mode of these switches, we were going to use the left-right mode, let's roleplay a scenario where that might be useful. Let's say we've got 4 microphones on a drum kit. We've got a left overhead and right overhead above the cymbals to give some sort of stereo image. And then we've got a snare and kick more or less in the centre. What we can do is set 3 and 4 to safe and record the entire stereo image onto tracks 1 and 2. Track 1 set to left, track 2 set to right. What that means is that we are kind of burning the stereo image direct to tape, and we don't have any way to change the panning of this after the fact. But all 4 of these channels are mixing down to 2 tracks, which still gives us 2 tracks free to overdub, say, I don't know, guitar and vocals, guitar and bass. I'm slightly less certain on what I'm saying here, because as I say, this is faulty and I'm waiting for spares, but I also believe that if you were to put a direct input to, say, track 5, say it was a stereo keyboard signal, then because that signal's going directly to the stereo bus and tracks 1 and 2 recording that stereo bus, then you would actually be able to record all 6 signals, 4 drum mics, the left and right side of the keyboard signal, and all of that information would be recorded to tracks 1 and 2. The recording assignment on this is working very similarly to how it does on a 464 or a 424 Mark III. The Tascam 246 is slightly more flexible in that all 6 of the channels can be assigned to any one of the 4 tape tracks or the stereo bus. So there's a bit less lateral thinking about how you would set up a recording session. Looking at the mixer itself, obviously we've got quite big chunky faders here. I like these knobs, the way they feel. It's kind of easier to feel what you're doing. There's a nice tactile quality to them. We've got a 3-band EQ, high shelf, low shelf. They're plus or minus 12 decibels. The low shelf is 100 Hz, the high shelf is 10,000 Hz. And then we've got this sweepable mid-band, which is also plus or minus 12 decibels, but the centre frequency goes from 160 Hz to 7.5 thousand Hz. It's a nice wide range. And the thing that's really nice about this is you've got these push buttons to change the Q factor. I'll quickly do a crude drawing to explain that. This is narrow Q, whereas this is wide Q. I know that's not very visible with a biro, but basically if this is set to narrow, then you're honing on a very particular frequency, so that would allow you to do things like if there was a a nasty rattle on a drum kit or a buzz that was coming out of a keyboard, you could tune in on that frequency with the gain turned up. Once you've found exactly the right frequency, turn it down and it's going to kind of suck out the problem noise and nothing else. Whereas wide Q, it's maybe you just feel like the guitar's a little bit hollow and it needs some mid-range, so you put that on wide and turn up a lot of the frequencies rather than a very specific one. So that's not a facility I've seen on any other 4-track, so that's nice. Here we've got the effects end. Like I say, kind of a little bit limited. It would be nice to have 2 of them, so you had that option of 2 mono effects that were panable or 1 stereo effect. And then we've got the pan control. These switches here change whether the channel is off or whether you're hearing back from the tape or whether you're hearing mic line, whatever this is set to, the input coming from in here. This has got 2 headphone sockets, and the headphone sockets are slightly different. The headphone socket 1 is always the master mix, whereas headphone socket 2, you can change between the line out or the cue or what's being sent through this effect bus. So here's my overall first impressions, which might be subject to change depending on how I get to use this. This is quite a nice blend of some of the things that make the 424 Mark III and the 246 my favourites. Well, 464 I like a lot as well, although that LCD screen is a little bit hard to read. They improved it with a backlit screen with the 424 Mark III. I like the fact that it's got analog VUs. I particularly like the fact that you've got this option to make the cue wide or narrow on the mid shift. good control of the transport. I haven't heard this HX Pro feature, but possibly that's a sound quality benefit. It's great that it has inserts and XLR inputs. The things that I would say make this less attractive to me than particularly the Tascam 246. Although this has got meters, it doesn't have a separate meters for the master output, which the 246 does. Compared to both the 246 and the 464 and the 424 Mark II and 3, only one effect send. The way I tend to use these, then, you know, that's not so great. I mean, like, if you're going to do some kind of dub thing where you want to have the option of, say, spring reverb and echo, switching them on live a la King Tubby, then you couldn't really do that very well with this with just one effect send, so that's a bit of a shame. And although this record routing system here, that's the same as the 424 Mark II and 3 and the 464, is okay, the more flexible routing on the 246 edges it out for me. So, you know, if I was going to go away to a desert island with only one 4-track, I mean, I would be very happy to have this or a 424 Mark III, or a 246, or a 464. I would have to say that because of the effects send, the mixer to tape routing, and the additional 2 VU meters, the 246 is still my overall favourite out of the units I'm discussing. But certainly this is very close to how I feel about the 464 and the 424 Mark III, and it does have some advantages, some disadvantages. I would have to use this one more extensively before I could make a call on that. But yeah, it's like a very nice feature-rich machine. I've looked inside it, the quality of everything in there is good, you know, it's like up there with the best Tascam stuff. So anyway, I hope that helps you make an informed choice if you're like looking at getting a 4-track and this is an option for you. There will be teardown videos of this coming. Check out my channels, loads more content like this. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.